Welcome to this week's edition of the VYPE podcast. It is episode 4 for us. I'm here with Tinley and Robert Gonsolin, and we are not the only 3 people in the studio here today. We also have outside linebacker for the Memorial Mustangs, Patrick Smith. Memorial just came off of a big win. They're on a roll, 5-1. They just won against Stratford, so we're looking forward to see what he has to say. But let's go ahead and get this week's game started off with Conroe and Oak Ridge. We predicted that Oak Ridge would win. How did they do?
So our predictions were right. Oak Ridge ultimately won 38 against Conroe, and Conroe had 14 points.
Yeah, it looks like all of our picks were perfect on this game. A huge defensive performance by Oak Ridge. They forced 8 turnovers.
8 turnovers. That's pretty impressive. They've got a 3-star recruit. His name is Alton McCaskill. He missed the last 2 games, but he bounced back tonight. Had 126 rushing yards, 3 receptions, and a touchdown. So defense wasn't the only strong point for Oak Ridge.
Not to mention McCaskill has offers from Oklahoma State, Ole Miss, and USC. So heading over to another prediction that we got correct. Kincaid and the St. John's game. Kincaid ultimately won 36-8.
Yeah, this marks the 69th year of the 4A South SBC rivalry game. Throughout the week, both schools have been getting ready for the big game as one day of the week. Both schools' themes is that they dress up as in the uniforms of the opposite high school.
Yeah, typically this rivalry game is played at Rice Stadium, but just because of COVID and for the first time since 1978, it was played at Kincaid's Field. But St. John's was actually the home team in this game.
Yeah, the Falcons' offense went off, guns blazing as they dominated the first half, 22-0.
Even by the third quarter, though, the Falcons' defense was on absolute lockdown, allowing no one to score off for the Mavericks.
That ultimately didn't hold up for too long since the Mavericks found a way to the end zone, making it 29-8 and with 11:43 left in the second half.
So this now makes Kincaid 6-0, but St. John's is now 1-3 overall and 6th in district, barely above Houston Christian, who is last place in SBC.
Yeah, Robert, let's talk about the Dawson and Strike Desert game. I know you were there. I heard it was a blowout.
Yeah, well, the Eagles absolutely dominated the ground game. They had 6 total rushing touchdowns from 4 different players. Of these 4 athletes, Jaden Stewart, the senior, shined with 110 yards and 2 touchdowns off of 13 carries.
As for the Crusaders, they started their sophomore quarterback, Bryce Pukich, in the second half in hopes of changing up the offensive tempo. As you can see, only scored 7 points, so it didn't make much of a difference.
Yeah, those 7 points by the Crusaders were scored at the very beginning, so yeah, not much changed, but because the Dawson's defense was just so dominant in this game, they had 2 interceptions, a fumble recovery, and they forced a safety.
So the Eagles are tied right now with Shadow Creek and Pearland in the 6A District 23 standings, but don't count out the Crusaders right now. They've got 3 pretty easy games, and you really don't want to discount other teams just because District 23 has been very competitive this year. But they still have a good chance to make the playoffs. They're 1-4 right now, I believe. So if they win out, end up 4-4, they're still probably the 4th best team in District 23.
Yes, their playoff hopes are very much alive. Heading over to District 19 6A, we have Katie Taylor beating Maid Creek this afternoon by a score of 56-42.
So this game ultimately turned out to be an absolute shootout in the last 15 minutes. The fourth quarter started with Maid Creek leading 35-34. And on the first play, Taylor's running back and Air Force commit Casey Shorter ran 58 yards to the house, which was followed by a successful 2-point conversion.
On the following kickoff, Maid Creek's Alpha Khan ran it back 95 yards, evening the game at 42 apiece. From that point onward, though, Taylor would take control of the game. Shorter found the end zone again 3 minutes later, and soon after, junior receiver Tyler Irving broke 5 tackles on a 7-yard touchdown reception.
Yeah, so Katie Taylor would go on to win this game by 14 and move up to the top of the 6A District 19 with Tompkins and Katie. And the next game that we've got is Southlake Carroll versus Keller. They won 42-10. Owen Allen rushed for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. They had a lot of sophomores shine in this game as Cade Parks got a sack and Logan Anderson got an interception.
Yeah, Carroll plays Keller Central next week. This is coming off of a stat sheet of Carroll producing 284 yards and 4 touchdowns from that national recruit Quinn Ewers. He has over 1,200 yards now and 15 touchdowns.
Yeah, this is a huge story. Just a few days ago, he decommitted from the University of Texas. He's considering a lot of schools, and Ohio State is among them. So let's, I know we are not recruiting experts, but as we're right here, let's just make predictions, and where will Quinn end up?
I think it's Ohio State. He mentioned he wanted to experience the full recruiting process and that he just wants to see what other windows could open up for him. I think it's Ohio State.
I mean, I'll agree with Ohio State. I just want to point out, though, I think it's really interesting the fact that two really good quarterbacks that were committed once to UT have ultimately dropped the school. And I'm just wondering, like, what are the reasons behind this all? But yeah, I do agree that he probably should be heading towards Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, that really has to say something about Tom Herman and just the recruiting coaches up there. I'm going to have to say Ohio State. Justin Fields is going to be gone after either this year or he may stay for his senior year, just depending on how the season ends up for the Buckeyes. But Quinn Ewers, number one recruit, all of 22, not just Texas, not just national.
Overall.
This is a huge story. We're talking about a guy that's considered one of the greatest Texas high school quarterbacks of all time, and he's only in his junior year right now.
I mean, easily, like, a lot of people were believing that he was going to stay with UT. He's been a UT fan since he could walk, practically. So having him change from a school that he's absolutely loved is crazy. Yeah, well, we got a little bit more excitement on this show as Memorial beat Stratford 17-10. It was pretty much a slugfest. The score is 3-0 going into the second half. Memorial actually got a field goal as time expired in the second half.
Yeah, Carson Zahn had 32 carries, 141 yards, and 1 touchdown. Memorial improves to 5-1 on the year, undefeated in the district, while their only loss is to Pearland.
Memorial versus Cypher will be a matchup of only 2 undefeated teams in District 17.
The Stratford's wide receiver Hawkins Polly had the best offensive play of the game for them. He had a touchdown after a broken tackle, but that was pretty much it. They had a field goal, drove down the field in the third quarter, but really that was their biggest offensive play and one of the only ones. They fall to 2-2 in the district. If the playoffs started today, they would make it, but they've got a lot of room for improvement. Well, we said earlier in the show that we have a player from Memorial, so let's Smith. All right, well, we're going to kick it over to our interview segment this week. We have outside linebacker Patrick Smith from Memorial. This week, y'all just had a big win over Stratford. That's always a big rivalry game. And you're 5-1 on the year, undefeated in the district. So let's just go ahead and start off. What do you think has been the biggest difference from this year and last year?
This year and last year, I would definitely say our defense has a lot more speed. Not exactly size, but we're always getting 11 people to the ball each play, and just a lot of hustle and like the team chemistry. Everyone's super close and just has a good time while we're being out there and win games in the process.
Yeah, let's stick with the defense. You've only given up 23 points in the last 4 games. And 2 weeks in a row, you didn't give up any points against Northbrook and Spring Woods. So what does Coach Koch emphasize to practice?
Well, Coach Koch doesn't really deal with us defensive players. I'd have to give all the credit to Coach Cripps. He's a really good defensive coordinator, and I'd say his schemes before each week, we really go into depth on how we can prevent plays, especially with last night against Stratford. They didn't know what to do, and we held them pretty well compared to other teams who have played them previously this season.
Yeah, and you held them pretty well. And then on offense, it was kind of slow in that first half. And I noticed that the team's been really run heavy this year. Zahn had like 32 carries in this game against Stratford. What do you have to say about the offense? I mean, I know you're not involved, but like just as a defensive player, you play against them in practice. What do you have to say about them?
I mean, hats off to the offense. They work hard. They do their assignments, but we're a really run-heavy offense, but it makes sense because Zahn's number shows for itself, and he might be small, but he really knows how to lay a hit when he's running that ball, and it's been successful so far, and hopefully it will carry us through the rest of the season.
So that run game and the defense together has put y'all on a pretty good roll. How are you feeling about going into this next week against Cy-Fair?
Cy-Fair is definitely going to be a tough game. They're a really good team. I know they have a really great running back, and I think our defense is going to do well against them. Hopefully we can get the ball moving on offense and try maybe spreading it out and get a little passing in there so we're not so predictable. But I think we have a good shot, and we take each game seriously, and I think it will be a good one.
Yeah, y'all have been taking it week by week. This led you to a 5-1 start. looking to make it 6-1 after next week. We just want to thank you for coming in, and we'll kick it back to the games. We were very happy to have Patrick in the studio with us today, and we like to close up these episodes recently with some predictions. So since we just had a player from Memorial, let's go ahead and start off with Memorial and Cy-Fair. I'm going to pick Memorial in this one. I saw them just this past weekend. They look really good, so I think they're on a roll, and they're going to stick with that.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with Cy-Fair in this matchup. LJ Johnson is just such a talented player. I just think he'll be quite dominant in this game, and not enough, or just too much for Memorial's defense.
I'm going to have to agree with Robert on this one. With Cy-Fair having previously won state in its past, I think this team is easily going to take the win.
Yeah, there's a huge game on Thursday night next week. That's going to be Katy and Tompkins.
That's a big game this week. I'm excited for that one. I'm going to personally say that Tompkins is winning this one. I mean, it was a pretty decent game last year, so I think Jalen Miller will ultimately take Tompkins to the win this season.
Yeah, I honestly think this is the biggest game of the week. I'm going to, in my mind, I think this is an upset, but I'm picking Tompkins for this game. I think Tompkins, they're the best they've ever been since they started the school about 5 or 6 years ago, and I just think that they're in prime form right now. I'm going with Tompkins.
Yeah, well, I saw some highlights of Jalen Milroe a few nights ago, and I was really impressed. So I'm going to have to say Tompkins. That's all three of us picked them, and it's pretty much an upset. The next game is going to be George Ranch and Ridge Point.
Yeah, I'm going to go with George Ranch on this one. I just think that even though they're in a new district, they're maintaining that just prime standard they're in every year. I'm going with the Longhorns in this one.
I'm definitely going to have to agree with you again on this one. I think George Ranch should easily win against Ridge Point. I think in this new district, like you said, they're in, I think this transition for them has helped them a lot in this season. And yeah, I think that'll definitely help them this.
Well, it's going to be another unanimous decision from us because I am going to pick George Ranch as well. We've got one more game. It's going to be Humble and Westbrook.
Yeah, see, Westbrook, they've been dominating this season. A huge win over Episcopal a couple of weeks ago. They've just maintained that momentum coming through these past couple of weeks. I'm going with Westbrook.
I'm going to switch it up, and I kind of want to be like, why not Humble? Let's see a win for the underdogs this time around.
Yeah, so Humble just took a pretty tough loss, 66-0 against the Task.
Oh yeah, no, they're definitely, we got this. Humble for sure.
So, and they also lost 55-6 against North Shore. So obviously those are two very tough teams to play, and Westbrook is another tough team. So I'm going to have to go with Westbrook on here.
You know what? Never count them out, though.
Arguably, though, that is probably one of the toughest districts in the state. Westbrook, North Shore, kind of just a very talented group of teams playing.
Tough teams you play against builds character. So maybe all of these tough losses might benefit
Turn out for the better.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, it might just do that. Obviously, that's a very tough decision, District 21. And there's a lot of special games coming up this week. We want to thank Patrick Smith for coming into the studio, and we want to thank all of you for listening. I'm Will Serbo. I am joined
by Robert Gonsolin
and Tinley Kane.